In the United States alone, an estimated 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. It's a statistic that casts a long, dark shadow, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of those we hold most dear. For the victims, it's a trauma that never fully fades, shaping lives, tearing families apart, and leaving an indelible mark on communities. For their loved ones, it's a nightmare they wouldn't wish upon their worst enemy, a nightmare that can come knocking when you least expect it. Nestled in the heart of Texas, Oak Haven was a town that prided itself on safety, unity, and tradition. Known for its sprawling oak-lined streets, warm southern charm, and a population that felt more like an extended family, it was a sort of place where everyone knew everyone, and trust ran deep. At the center of it all were two towering figures, Mayor Thomas Walker, whose steady leadership had guided Oak Haven for over a decade, and FBI Director Jonathan Reed, a national figure whose career was built on integrity and an unyielding commitment to justice. The two men shared more than just professional success. They shared a lifelong bond, a friendship forged in childhood and strengthened over decades. Before we continue, quickly subscribe to this channel now for you to be the first to receive stories like this when it drops, and it serves as an inspiration to produce more contents like this for your consumption. Now let's continue. But Oak Haven's tranquility was shattered one fateful morning when Judge Alexander Porter, a pillar of the community, was found murdered in his own home. The town was thrown into disarray as questions mounted. Who would target a man known for his fairness and dedication to the law? And why? The answers, when they came, would shock everyone. Among the many threads of this unraveling tragedy, one led to a connection that few could have foreseen: the mayor's own family. It was a story that would shake the very foundations of Oak Haven. A story of power abused, trust betrayed, and lives forever changed. At the heart of it all was someone far more vulnerable than anyone could have imagined: the mayor's teenage daughter. Her world, once filled with promise, would become the epicenter of a conflict that exposed the darkest corners of the human spirit. And so began the unraveling of a tale where the lines between victim and perpetrator, friend and foe, loyalty and deceit would blur. The Walker family had always been the picture of stability and success in Oak Haven. Thomas Walker, as mayor, was beloved for his charisma and steady leadership. His wife, Sarah, was a quiet strength behind the family, known for her warmth and dedication to various community causes. Their daughter, Emily, was a reflection of their values: bright, ambitious, and full of promise. At 17, Emily was on the cusp of adulthood, with dreams of studying law and making a difference in the world. Her academic excellence and kind demeanor made her a favorite among teachers and peers alike. For Emily, the future seemed limitless. Among those who took notice of her potential was Judge Alexander Porter. A man of high regard, Porter had long been a family friend. He was a trusted advisor to the mayor, often seen at family gatherings and town events. When he offered to mentor Emily, it seemed like the perfect opportunity. With her aspirations to enter the legal field, having guidance from someone as accomplished as Judge Porter felt like a gift. Her father trusted him implicitly, and Sarah was reassured by his reputation. At first, the mentorship seemed innocent enough. Porter encouraged Emily to shadow him in court, providing insights into legal proceedings and sharing anecdotes from his career. Emily, eager to learn, soaked up every moment. She admired his intellect and was flattered by the attention he gave her. "I do hope you have subscribed already, as it is about to get really interesting." He praised her potential, calling her mature beyond her years and assuring her she had the makings of a great lawyer. But as time went on, the dynamic began to shift. It started subtly: extra time spent alone during their meetings, lingering conversations about her personal life. Porter's interest in Emily extended beyond academics. He asked questions about her friends, her relationships, and her fears. What had once been professional encouragement now felt more personal. Emily, initially unsure, hesitated to express her discomfort. After all, this was Judge Porter, a man her father respected deeply. The boundaries began to blur further. Porter's compliments grew more frequent, his touches, a pat on the shoulder, a brush of the hand, more deliberate. He started texting her late at night, under the guise of checking in on her studies. Emily found herself trapped in a whirlwind of confusion, unsure of how to reconcile the judge she had admired with the unease creeping into their interactions. For someone in Emily's position, the power imbalance was overwhelming. Porter, with his authority and experience, held all the cards. He knew how to navigate the trust people placed in him, how to mask his intentions behind a veneer of mentorship. For Emily, his manipulation was a slow erosion of boundaries, one that left her isolated and vulnerable. What had begun as an opportunity of a lifetime had become a nightmare she couldn't escape, leaving her grappling with guilt, fear, and a growing sense of betrayal. For Emily, the fallout was swift and merciless. The once vibrant 17-year-old began to retreat into herself, her laughter replaced by silence and her confidence by fear. Anxiety clawed at her every moment, turning even the smallest interactions into monumental challenges. Sleep eluded her, and when it came, it brought nightmares she couldn't escape. Depression took hold, pulling her deeper into a darkness she struggled to explain, even to those who loved her most. The physical toll of the abuse was undeniable, but it was the emotional scars that cut deepest. Then came the diagnosis that would change everything. A routine checkup revealed what Emily had feared but couldn't bring herself to confront. She had contracted HIV, a devastating consequence of the abuse she had endured. The news shattered her. It was a cruel, irreversible mark of what had been taken from her, a constant reminder of the betrayal and manipulation that had stolen her innocence. For Thomas Walker, the revelation was a wrecking ball. The moment Emily told him what had happened, his world collapsed. The grief was immediate, a tidal wave of guilt, anger, and despair. How could he, a man who prided himself on protecting his family and community, have allowed this to happen under his own roof? The betrayal was made all the worse by the identity of the perpetrator, Judge Alexander Porter, his trusted friend, a man he had welcomed into their lives with open arms. Rage consumed him. He wanted to lash out, to demand justice, to make Porter feel the pain he had inflicted on Emily. But alongside the anger came a paralyzing helplessness. His daughter, his bright, hopeful Emily, was suffering in ways he couldn't fix. And in his anger, his grief, he began to withdraw, unsure of how to face the enormity of what had happened. Sarah Walker bore the weight of the family's disintegration. As Thomas turned inward, she was left to pick up the pieces. She stood by Emily as best she could, offering support even when she didn't know the right words to say. But the strain on her marriage was undeniable. The trust and partnership she and Thomas had once shared now felt fractured. Their shared pain drove them apart, each struggling to cope in their own way. Meanwhile, the community of Oak Haven was left reeling. News of the abuse spread like wildfire, shattering the idyllic image of the town. People whispered in disbelief, their faith in their leaders and institutions shaken to the core. The Walkers, once admired, became a symbol of the town's collective failure to protect one of their own. Thomas Walker knew he couldn't let this stand, but the road to justice was fraught with obstacles. As a public figure, every move he made was scrutinized, every word weighed. He struggled to reconcile his personal grief with his responsibilities as a leader. Yet, beneath the despair, a resolve began to form. He owed it to Emily, to his family, and to the town to hold Porter accountable. The search for justice became his driving force, though it was far from straightforward. Porter's power and influence loomed large, complicating every step of the process. But for Thomas, failure wasn't an option. It wasn't just about retribution. It was about ensuring that no other child would endure what Emily had, and that the truth, no matter how painful, would finally come to light. The events leading to Judge Alexander Porter's murder began with a storm of desperation and fury. On a quiet evening, long after the courthouse had emptied, Thomas Walker arrived at Porter's chambers. He carried with him the weight of his daughter's pain, the betrayal of a trusted friend, and the rage of a father who had failed to protect his child. Witnesses later described seeing Thomas enter the building, his face a mask of determination, his steps purposeful. Inside those chambers, words were exchanged, harsh, accusatory, and laced with years of friendship that had been reduced to ashes. Thomas demanded answers, demanded accountability. Porter, ever composed, denied everything, his calm demeanor only fueling the mayor's anger. What happened next remains a point of contention. The forensic evidence pointed to a violent struggle, a shattered glass, overturned furniture, and the fatal shot that ended Porter's life. When the dust settled, Porter lay dead, and Thomas was gone, leaving behind a scene that would send shockwaves through Oak Haven. The investigation was swift and meticulous. The police combed through Porter's chambers, piecing together the events of that night. What they found painted a damning picture of the judge's double life. Hidden among his files were emails, text messages, and photographs that exposed a history of predatory behavior. Porter had manipulated and abused his position for years, preying on vulnerable young women while maintaining his facade of respectability. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community, shattering any lingering doubts about his guilt. As the evidence mounted, so did the scrutiny on Thomas Walker. He was arrested the next day, his reputation as mayor crumbling under the weight of his actions. The trial that followed became a spectacle, drawing national attention to the once quiet town of Oak Haven. The prosecution presented a case of premeditated murder, citing Thomas's anger and the damning evidence found at the scene. The defense, however, painted a different picture. A grieving father pushed to the brink, a man who had confronted evil and acted in a moment of despair. Emily's testimony became the centerpiece of the trial. She spoke of the abuse she had endured, the betrayal she had suffered, and the unimaginable impact it had on her life. Her words were a powerful indictment of Porter's character, leaving little doubt about the horrors he had inflicted. But they also shed light on the depth of her father's pain, a pain that had driven him to an act of irreversible finality. The jury deliberated for days, torn between the evidence of Thomas's guilt and the context of his actions. When the verdict was finally read, the courtroom held its breath. Thomas Walker was found guilty of manslaughter, a decision that reflected both his culpability and the extenuating circumstances surrounding the case. The sentence was lighter than many expected, but it marked the end of a chapter that had left no one unscathed. The aftermath of the trial was a time of reckoning for Oak Haven. The town grappled with its collective failure to see the truth about Porter and its consequences for the Walkers. For Emily, the road to healing was long and uncertain, but she found strength in her story, using it to advocate for survivors and raise awareness about abuse. For Thomas, the path was one of reflection and redemption, a journey to make peace with his actions and rebuild what remained of his family. In the end, the events in Oak Haven served as a stark reminder of the fragility of trust and the resilience of those who fight to reclaim their lives from the shadows of betrayal. The tragedy that engulfed the Walker family and Oak Haven left scars that would never fully heal. For Emily, the journey forward was one of resilience and determination. The trauma of her abuse, the diagnosis that marked her future, and the public scrutiny she endured became a burden she carried daily. Yet, in the face of despair, she found purpose. Emily became an advocate, using her voice to speak out for those who couldn't. Through her courage, she inspired change in Oak Haven and beyond, transforming her pain into a catalyst for hope. For Thomas and Sarah, the road was more complicated. Their marriage, once a beacon of stability, bore the weight of unimaginable grief. Yet, in time, they found a way to support each other, united by their love for their daughter. Thomas, even from within the confines of his sentence, worked to raise awareness about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of safeguarding the vulnerable. Sarah continued to anchor the family, quietly rebuilding their lives while supporting Emily's mission. The town of Oak Haven was forever changed. The facade of perfection had been stripped away, revealing a community that had ignored the warning signs of a predator in its midst. Schools, churches, and local organizations implemented stricter policies and training to protect young people. Conversations about abuse, once shrouded in discomfort, became more open and honest. And while the memory of what had happened lingered, Oak Haven emerged as a symbol of what could be achieved when silence was broken and action was taken. The tragedy also sparked broader changes in the legal system. Emily's story highlighted the need for stricter oversight of those in positions of power and the importance of providing better resources for victims. Laws were passed, inspired by her advocacy, to hold abusers accountable and prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Please, my beloved family, remember to subscribe so that you won't miss out the next top story on the line. Thank you for doing so. But the lessons extended beyond the courtroom. The story of Oak Haven was a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of abuse, the insidious ways power can be exploited, and the importance of believing and supporting survivors. It underscored the need for a cultural shift, one that prioritized consent, awareness, and the unwavering protection of the vulnerable. The story ends not with closure but with a call to action. Abuse thrives in silence, in the spaces where fear and shame take root. It is the responsibility of every individual to speak out, to report suspected abuse, and to stand with survivors. Organizations dedicated to combating child sexual exploitation need support, both financial and emotional, to continue their critical work. To those watching, this is a reminder. Change begins with awareness, and awareness begins with you. Emily's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of collective action. Together, we can ensure that no child suffers in silence and that justice is not an ideal but a reality.